Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session today. It's a very special webinar day that we remember when the Earth Charter was launched 23 years ago on the 29th of June 2000 in The Hague, the Peace Palace in The Hague. In the webinar today, we wanted to organize it around the theme emerging efforts towards planetary well-being and ecological civilization. I want to thank each one of you who are joining us today as a participant and also our guest speakers. And I also want to acknowledge that this event is being organized with the support of SGI, Soka Gakkai, and the Club of Rome. Soka Gakkai, or SGI, has been really partnering with Earth Charter International for over 2 decades in many ways, including at the launch ceremony 23 years ago. Okayama University also is involved in this, especially because we are organizing 2 sessions, one to adapt to the different time zones. And the Club of Rome, and especially with the connection with their Emerging New Civilization initiative. Let me say from the outset that this meeting is going to be in English and in Spanish. So there's going to be English and Spanish translation. If you only speak one language, you need to look at the bottom bar of your Zoom window and find an icon that indicates interpretation, so that you click on the link of the language that you can understand. And if you can understand both languages, you just stay in the main room. This meeting is also organized under the framework of our UNESCO Chair on Education for Sustainable Development with the Earth Charter, that we coordinate here together with the University for Peace, that has also been a very key partner of Earth Charter International for over 2 decades. I want to start by thanking also our staff, our Earth Charter International staff and team here in Costa Rica, Alicia Jimenez, Amanda Bennett, Maria Sosa, and Charlene Zamora, who have been dedicating a lot of their time to the Earth Charter International. As you know, the Earth Charter is a global movement that involves many people that are actually beyond our staff, including the whole administrative support of the University for Peace. Over the past 2 decades, we have also had the collaboration of many co-facilitators and researchers of our courses and education programs. I want also to express gratitude to the ECI Council members, especially those who have been working with us for years or very closely with us: Michael Bracken, Song Lee, Paul Luvers, Mac Pezzi, Jane Kilonzo, Rick Clugston, among many others. And as you know, the Earth Charter is a global movement, and therefore collaboration and shared vision is essential. And therefore, as a movement, we have a number of Earth Charter International affiliated organizations and partners. And I also want to acknowledge that there are actually 2 events taking place at the same time today and now, one in Holland and one in Mexico, in Monterrey. There are actually face-to-face events under the framework of the 23rd anniversary of the Earth Charter. And therefore, many of the affiliates in Holland and in Mexico are actually at this other meeting. I also want to acknowledge that over the past 2 decades, a main effort of Earth Charter International has been to empower, involve, and educate young leaders to enhance their capacity to be ethical leaders and use the Earth Charter as an instrument. So there are a number of Earth Charter young leaders also involved here, not only in this session today, but throughout what happens with the Earth Charter. And we also have many advisors that have been supporting ECI in many different ways in the last 2 decades. By the way, many who have published books and articles. We have an Earth Charter bibliography that is available in our website. I ask here our friends to share actually even the link, because it's important, and there's a scholarly work being done over the past 2 decades on the significance of the Earth Charter. So today, 23 years ago, the Earth Charter was launched at the Peace Palace in The Hague in a very special ceremony. It was the beginning of the millennium, the beginning of a new century. There were a lot of questions, a lot of feelings of hope, but also despair, I would say, or even uncertainty. I wrote a brief reflection on that, so what specifically happened that day, and we posted it in our website yesterday. But the vision and the purpose was really to look to make use of the Earth Charter as an instrument to expand our vision, to expand our vision beyond our borders, to expand our consciousness, to look at our relationship among ourselves, among humans, humans across borders, across cultures, and expand how we ought, our consciousness with regards to how we ought to relate to the large living world, the community of life. So it's really one of the key purposes of the Earth Charter since its launch and even before was to articulate an ethical framework, of an ethic of care that could be used as an instrument to deepen and expand our consciousness. And I think it continues to be nowadays. So, so as I mentioned, many things has happened in the last 2 decades. It's very hard even for us to assess the impact of the Earth Charter, but certainly books, publications, podcasts. We have many, and today is a special day because we are launching our first Earth Charter magazine. We have been working over the last couple of months in putting together a magazine that was edited by a team. Maria Sosa, who is here with us, was actually her idea to put together this Earth Charter magazine. Lindsay Bakuri and myself, we have been around this, but the magazine actually is coming together thanks to the contribution of several authors with short reflection articles, but also articles that are more based on research. One is Alicia Jimenez, Fatima Lima Verde, and Tiago from Brazil, Janica, who is from South Africa, Varveli Maya Matarazzo, who is in Brazil, Timothy Ojin, who's originally from Nigeria and is now based in the US and Wellington. So Maria, would you like to share just the cover of the magazine and the link? We invite all of you to read the magazine and share it widely. I don't know if you can share the cover. If not, you can, yeah. Good, thank you. There's, of course, a lot of effort has been taking place here to put together this magazine and share with us and share with you. And both the magazine and the event today are organized also as an effort for us to put together spaces for dialogue and share reflections around the Earth Charter. And we are already planning to build from the conversation today. Next year, we are planning a conference in April 2024 to take place in Florida, the USA, also around the theme of ecological civilization, looking at how can we reimagine education towards ecological civilizations. So now I would like to give the floor to Akpezi Ogbuye, who is now in Nigeria, and she's going to be chairing our meeting today. Akpezi is a board member of the Earth Charter International, but she has done many things. She's certainly a very inspiring human being. But she, among many other things, she has been the head of UNEP, the Environment Education Program of UNEP, the UN Environment Program. And we are joined today here by 3 great speakers. Jeremy Land, who is now in California. He's the author of this great book, The Web of Meaning. And, I very much hope that we are going to be actually having more conversations with Jeremy Land about worldviews and ecological civilization. Ricardo Young, who is also a member of the Earth Charter International Council, and he is a former chair of Ethos Institute, which is an institute of business and social responsibility in Brazil, and Laura Restrepo. Laura is in Colombia, and she's a coordinator of special projects in the climate reality Latin America. Thank you so much, each one of you, for being here. Laura is also a co-facilitator for our Earth Charter Young Leaders program. So thank you all for being here. Now, Akpezi, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Miriam. And thank you for your sacrifice all these many years to ensure that this important document, the Earth Charter, lives and impacts the global future that we're all working and looking towards. I think before I delve in, and begin to engage with our distinguished panelists, I will first of all, just like there's this short quote from Mikhail Gorbachev on the day, this same day, 23 years ago, when the Earth Charter document was launched. And this was what he said. He said, during almost 50 years in politics, I have had to sign a lot of documents, you can imagine. And the Earth Charter is above everything I have signed so far. And that is why I am a bit nervous. And I guess I feel the same thing today. There's so many documents, but the Earth Charter is unique. And I think as we go on together, you will see why we all need to pick it up and run with it. The race is on to 2030 and success with the Sustainable Development Goals. There are, however, questions that we must ask regarding the extent to which these global efforts have had an impact on planetary well-being and setting us on the path towards ecological civilizations. In other words, how have the SDGs contributed to the promotion of harmonious coexistence of humans and nature, and humans? What should be the role of the Earth Charter? And these are the things that our distinguished panelists are going to, help us to, demystify. And the first question, but before the first question, the topic we're looking at again is emerging efforts towards planetary well-being and ecological civilizations. And the first question is this: what do we mean by ecological civilizations? In other words, what does ecological civilization look like? And the first person to go for it is the renowned author, Jeremy Lent. Jeremy, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Akpezi. Yeah, thanks, Miriam, for this, for hosting this wonderful event. And I just want to say, for me personally, when I first came across the Earth Charter some years back, I couldn't believe what I was reading. As I was halfway through, it was bringing tears to my eyes, and I was just going, "This is it. This is what it's meant to be." And the thing that kept going through my mind is, why doesn't every teenager at school start their whole education and of sort of higher learning on this basis? It's so fundamental. And so to answer your question, Akpezi, about what does an ecological civilization mean, we can really just understand it, if you will, as imagine what a whole global civilization would look like that was built on the basis of the principles of the Earth Charter. It's really as simple and profound as that. So what we mean, at least, I think the term ecological civilization can mean different things to different people. So I don't want to sort of give the sense that, oh yeah, I speak for what an ecological civilization is, but I can tell you my interpretation of it, which I think is consistent with other people I've come across, which is to look at really start off by looking at the contrast with our current civilization. And if we look at the basis of our current civilization, we see that it's based on things like extraction, exploitation, And the ultimate value of our current civilization is really like wealth accumulation. It's all about looking at others as resources, other people to exploit, to get as wealthy as possible, or the rest of our non-human relatives on the living earth as just basically nothing other than resources to extract, to to build as much wealth as possible. That's really the fundamentals of our current dominant civilization. An ecological civilization would be foundationally different, would be built on a life-affirming foundation. So imagine a civilization that the overriding objective of it was to create the conditions for all humans to flourish as part of a thriving, living earth. And the wonderful thing about that notion is that we realize it would affect every aspect of civilization. It's not just a matter of economics, which of course is incredibly important, like to well-being economics, etc. But every part of our civilization, whether it's politics or culture or urban design or technology or how we grow food, every single part of what we do, our education systems, how corporations, how businesses are organized would be designed in a different way. And the principles of that civilization would be actually inspired by the principles that have made ecosystems so healthy and vibrant. Sometimes over millions of years, they can be resilient and strong with each other until humans come along and basically start to destroy them. So the sort of principles, like a fundamental principle of life as it's evolved on this earth, is mutually beneficial symbiosis, where different parts of an ecosystem work together to create something that is larger than the whole, and where each part is part of an integrated whole, so that the flourishing of each part leads to the flourishing of the entire ecosystem. Those are the kinds of principles that an ecological civilization would be based on, applied to human society. So that just gives a sense, and I'll stop there. I could to talk about it forever, but just that sort of gives a feeling for what we're talking about.
Yes, I hear you, Jeremy. I hear you, Jeremy. And when you talk about, tears coming out of your eyes when you first saw the document, the Charter document, I just remember I just read an article from the magazine that is being launched today, the one written by Timothy Ogene. The same experience you had. That was the same experience, he also had, and everything you are saying, it's so wonderful to hear. But then let's go on to Ricardo Young. Yes, I want to see how do you see ecological civilization? What does it look like?
Thank you, Expezi. It's wonderful to be here with you. It's really great to be commemorating this 23rd anniversary of the Charter. I remember 23 years ago, it was a collective dream, and we were really committed to make it come through. And 2 decades has passed, and we can see what are the real challenges of what we dream together. Thank you, Miriam, for all your effort, for your leadership. Mike was here also. Thank you, Michael. What I would like to say about this, I think that an ecological civilization, it's very much of what Jean-Marie said, have to have life at the center of all the values. Because life in this planet is a cosmos miracle, and life and nature are able to collaborate, compete, collaborate, energize itself, regenerate processes, and so on and so forth. Earth Charter is the strongest ethical reference we could have to an ecological civilization. I really think that the heart of what we think about an ecological civilization is in the 4 main axes of the Earth Charter. Responsibility and taking care of the community of life. This is putting life in the center. Integrity, ecological integrity. The idea that we have to work in a way to regenerate nature and restore the balance and equilibrium about all the living beings in this planet. Fight poverty, economic and social justice. That's really essential. We cannot have an ecological civilization if we don't have justice, if we don't have social justice. And we, maybe because of the climate change threat, we talk too much about environment and too less about social justice. And we cannot forget that one thing will not happen without another thing. And then we go to democracy, nonviolence, and peace, because it's in democracy that we can really collaborate as nations, as peoples, as culture, and so on. Then all the main aspects of the ecological civilization are there. Why we don't get there, why we have so many difficulties to get there. I think this is the main challenge. And now I will conclude this first saying that Lula recently was in Paris, in France, in an international event. And he was discussing with the president of France, Macron, the new agreement of the European Community and Brazil. And in one moment, he seemed to be very impolite when he said, the fault of the climate crisis is those that invented the Industrial Revolution. For more impolite that he could be in that moment, he said something that is really deep. The values we have until today in our countries, in the nations, in the world, are values that go really against the interest of all the beings and the human beings in the planet. And he was careful enough to not say the capitalist system, because it's more than the capitalism system. It's a concept of consuming, producing, plundering nature, the resources, and so on, that have to stop. And this is the ethic parameters that oriented us until now. And we are on the mess we know we are. Then, if we don't look seriously and deeply to the ethical reference that Earth Charter inspires, I think we will have a lot of difficulties to go on and change things. I can comment this in another question. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. So for the first question, Ricardo and Jeremy, I mean, I hear, some similarities. I hear these words, life. Both of you emphasize the word life, life being the center, of everything. And it seems as if what we have now, it's not life, but it's a kind of extraction, take the more, consume more, take more, how much more you need. So thank you so much. And I heard the emphasis on social justice. These are important things. And I think what you said, your president, mentioned in his speech, is also very, very important when he said our values go against where we want to go. We want to go to a sustainable future, but the values will not take us there, because imagine a green company. The more the company sells, the better, even if it's selling a green product. Well, then you determine the success of that company by the more people consume. So it's really, it won't take us where we're going. But let's go on. Let's go on digging. The second question now that we're going to look at to help us, understand this thing is that what are some of the good practices in the effort of using and implementing the Earth Charter? Now we're coming home. And implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. Particularly, what are some examples of emerging efforts towards planetary well-being and of building ecological civilizations. And I'm going to ask Laura Restrepo to kindly help us to begin to look into the space here. Yes, Laura, please.
Muchas gracias, Akpesi. Y pues
Yeah.
también gusto estar aquí con todos y todas ustedes. Para mí es un honor, además, que me hayan invitado y que Miriam también esté haciendo esfuerzos para traer más jóvenes líderes a estos espacios. Para mí es un avance muy importante en el compromiso de Carta de la Tierra con una inclusión y una diversidad. Y en ese sentido también me gustaría resaltar que desde mi experiencia considero que algo muy importante que me ha enseñado Carta de la Tierra es que Carta de la Tierra puede ser un marco ético para la implementación de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible. Y esto tiene un énfasis muy importante para mí porque hay muchos objetivos de desarrollo sostenible que si se ven que si no se ven interconectados, entonces podemos caer como en una falsa implementación de la sostenibilidad. Es decir, si solo nos encargamos, por ejemplo, de mirar implementación de energías renovables sin tener en cuenta la interconexión y la interdependencia con otros objetivos de desarrollo sostenible y también con lo que nos muestra Carta de la Tierra, con lo que decían Jeremy y Ricardo de poner la vida en el centro de las decisiones, pues entonces entramos en un dilema de implemento solo energías de desarrollo sostenible o implemento otras cosas. Pero cuando vemos Carta de la Tierra como un eje regente en las acciones, entonces podemos entender que desde la interconexión podemos ejecutar acciones desde los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible de manera interconectada y de manera sistémica, que además que creo que es algo muy importante cuando hablamos de Carta de la Tierra, esta visión sistémica que nos permite entenderla como un núcleo, como una semilla para generar acciones en torno a los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Y aquí me gustaría traer un par de ejemplos. Creo que un ejemplo muy importante para mí pues es la misma Carta de la Tierra, porque nos enseña a otras personas desde la educación, que creo que es un pilar fundamental cuando hablamos de implementar los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, cómo integrar estas acciones a lo que podemos tener desde los principios de Carta de la Tierra. Creo que estas acciones integradoras son fundamentales para que las personas también se replanteen desde los posicionamientos éticos y morales cuáles podrían ser unas acciones que en serio tengan la vida en el centro, que reverencien la vida, que es una de las posturas que más me gusta a mí de Carta de la Tierra, que el nuestro se reconozca como un nuevo momento para reverenciar la vida. Y poniendo otro ejemplo que a mí me gusta un montón, no lo ejecuto yo, pero lo ejecuta otra lideresa de la Carta de la Tierra que se llama Raquel Zagot, y es Fundación Orgánica, y me ha enseñado un montón, porque yo nunca me había pensado desde la posición de la movilidad sostenible, y cómo integramos la movilidad sostenible no solo para personas con discapacidades, sino entender las ciudades también desde el centro de la vida, es decir, cómo nos planeamos la movilidad para poder entender que no necesariamente tengo que hacer aceras para discapacitados, sino cómo pienso las ciudades desde la parte humana y desde la parte animal, para que la movilidad no afecte esta interconectividad de la vida, para entender que la movilidad también tiene que tener presente, por ejemplo, los ecosistemas estratégicos, entender las limitaciones que pueden no ser solo físicas, sino que pueden también ser mentales. Entonces, si les interesa, Fundación Orgánica me parece un ejemplo maravilloso de integración de los valores de Carta de la Tierra en las acciones diarias. Me parece un ejemplo espectacular. Y desde mi experiencia, pues nosotras también en The Climate Reality Project América Latina hemos ido integrando muchos de estos aprendizajes a Carta de la Tierra. De hecho, en febrero tuvimos a Miriam y Amanda en unos seminarios que para nosotras son fundamentales en nuestra apuesta de educación, y desde Climate Reality sí queremos y tenemos una apuesta muy importante para que la acción climática no sea solo acciones sin sentido, sino acciones desde la ética, desde eso que nos hace profundamente humanos, pero también entendiendo esta postura ética de reverenciar la vida, también desde el respeto a la otredad y el respeto a todos los seres vivos, porque no son solo los humanos, sino también los animales humanos los que tienen derecho y dignidad a habitar la tierra en salud y en pleno goce de derechos, y aquí también los animales humanos y no humanos disfrutando la tierra. Para mí eso es esencial, y desde Climate Reality creo que es una apuesta muy importante que tenemos desde hace un par de años, y me alegra un montón de nuevo poder estar acá, poder compartir con ustedes, ver caras conocidas como Michael, Sam, Ricardo y Miriam. Un gusto también conocer a Jeremy y a Pesi, y bueno, paro ahí porque ya tomé mis 5 minutos.
Yeah, thank you so much, Laura. You just, as you contributed, you took me back to my village, because there was always room for people and nature, and I think that's one of the things that is being highlighted, by the Earth Charter. Thank you so much. Let me quickly go back to Ricardo Young. We need more examples. Could you give us more examples of how the Earth Charter and the Sustainable Development Goals have contributed to this future that we are looking towards?
I think that the SDGs are the practical side, let's say, the very material side of the Earth Charter. If you look to each one of the 17 goals, you will find a perfect correspondence with the Earth Charter. And when you look to the 159 ways of doing the goals, you will find very concrete suggestions to action. Then I really think that it was, of course, it wasn't the intention of the United Nations to make this link. But of course, if we're looking to sustainable development, we have to have another ethical reference, and the Charter is there, is giving all the guidelines needed to the SDGs. What I think is really good about the SDGs is that the SDGs were incorporated by governments, at least here in Brazil, by state governments, federal government, and businesses as a very strong strategical guideline to everything that is being done here. Then it's very common to discuss the relationship of ESG governance, social, environmental governance, and the SDGs. And some interesting things that are happening here in Brazil. The water issue is becoming very sensitive, and several initiatives regarding rights to water and new technologies based in nature are being used to recuperate the capacity of several territories to produce water again. And this is becoming mainstream. Next year, we will have elections for mayors in all of the 5,600 cities in Brazil. And the parties and the candidates are already discussing very seriously what will be their policy about water. Then this is the 6th SDG goal, and is one of the rights that we can see in the Earth Charter. Another thing that's really important is reforestation. For the last 4 years, we had, unfortunately, a government that was really against nature, environment, and so on. And now in this first month of the new government, Marina, as the Minister of Environment, is implementing several initiatives in order to stop the deforestation and to start to recuperate all the destruction we had. And the carbon market became a strong tool and able to implement this reforestation. And I can see, and I'm in a close relationship with financial funds that are being put together raising millions and millions of dollars to invest in reforestation. Then this is another very important initiative, and Brazil is putting a bill now that will regulate and organize all this market. Then I foresee a great speed on investments in reforestation in Brazil. Another very interesting initiative is the Net Zero Brazil. That's a branch of the Net Zero from the Economic World Forum that is taking care of sensitizing the boards of the companies about the needs to have net zero results in 2030. And taking this discussion to the boards is becoming very, very important, because we're seeing how the business boards are not literate in several of the issues of sustainability. Then we can see now for 3 years, we have this initiative. We can see in the agro industry. And finally, a reference that everybody here had, but I really like this reference, and I think it was the initiative in the right way, was the initiative of Paul Holken of the Drawdown, the Drawdown initiative for
I think he's gone, so we can move on. Akpesi.
Yes, Ricardo, yes, thank you if you can hear us. Yeah, he's given us a lot of examples, that the SDG has brought to the table. And I would like to just connect, before I go to the next question, the description, what Laura said. Laura described the Earth Charter. I said it's an ethical framework. And Ricardo said it's an ethical reference, and that the SDGs would not be complete without it. So you have all these activities, you have all these initiatives, which are good, but if you do not bring in the life issue, the respect issue, the justice issue, then it cannot take us to the future, to the ecological future that we are looking towards. And let's continue to delve into this topic as we look at it again, from another question. And the third question is, what are the relationships between the SDGs and the Earth Charter? We have, both speakers have kind of started, introducing it. But what are the relationships? Let's now clarify it, more deeply. Is Ricardo back with us? Ricardo, are you back with us? Okay. Yes. Can you start on that discussion? What is the relationship, between the Sustainable Development Goals and the Earth Charter?
Yeah, Jeremy, it's to me or to Jeremy the question, or to Laura? Okay, I will say some words and then we can go to our colleagues here. As I said, the relationship is direct. I think that the Charter gives the ethical reference in order to implement the SDGs. Because you can implement the SDGs in a compliance space. You can implement the SDGs because the law expects some things, because the public opinion expects some things, but not really have a new ethical approach. And I think that the Earth Charter gives the ethical approach needed to really implement the SDGs as a system, as a whole system, and not as parts of governmental programs or business strategies.
Yeah, thank you, Ricardo. And Laura, what do you see? How do you see this connection? You had already, hinted on it when you spoke earlier on, but how would you want to develop it further?
Gracias, Akpesi. por un momento casi hablo en inglés, cambiar el switch. Como lo venía diciendo, y creo que comparto esta opinión con Ricardo y con Jeremy, creo que la Carta de la Tierra es un marco ético muy importante, porque justo cuando intentamos desarrollar algunos objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, para poner un ejemplo, hacer grandes granjas de energía solar en zonas de reserva, para poner un ejemplo, ¿sí? Estamos cumpliendo con el objetivo de desarrollo sostenible de pronto de energía asequible y no contaminante, pero estamos vulnerando el objetivo de desarrollo sostenible que tiene que ver con vida terrestre y protección de ecosistemas terrestres. Entonces, aquí es cuando creo yo que podemos venir y leer de nuevo aquí Carta de la Tierra, que siempre está en mi mesita, y es porque cuando tenemos este tipo de dilemas, creo que Carta de la Tierra trae como luces a esta decisión. Es decir, para mí Carta de la Tierra nos trae como cuáles son estos principios y como estos infaltables en la toma de decisiones para poder ejecutar decisiones y acciones que efectivamente no atenten contra la vida. Entonces, para mí, este es el complemento de Carta de la Tierra y Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible. Si bien son diferentes, no implica que sean excluyentes el uno con el otro, sino que justamente necesitan como esta interconexión de entender que los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible son indicadores y metas que buscan un mundo sostenible, pero a esto le falta una visión sistémica interconectada que sí lo provee Carta de la Tierra como un marco ético muy importante, como un marco ético que de verdad te permite a ti entender cuándo estás atentando o no contra la vida, que para mí es lo más importante, la vida más allá de otras cosas, como mencionaban, como el capital, como la acumulación, como el sistema en el que vivimos actualmente. Y aquí también creo que algo que ha hecho Carta de la Tierra con su aplicación Mapping es entender en qué lugares estamos ejecutando objetivos de desarrollo sostenible y cómo se interrelacionan estos con los principios de Carta de la Tierra, que creo que verlo de esta forma también ayuda a muchas personas a entender cuáles son las relaciones directas entre esos objetivos de desarrollo sostenible y los principios de Carta de la Tierra.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much, Laura. And Jeremy, yes. Yeah, so what are your views? What is the relationship between the SDGs and the...
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, honestly, when I look at the SDGs, I feel we have to be clear about a couple of things. One is, if we look at what those goals were, and here we are halfway through the time period for them, we find that in many of these goals, not only are we not actually moving fast enough towards the goal, we're even moving in the wrong direction away from the goal. And when we look at the reality around that, we have to ask why. And I feel that one of the reasons why is, on the one hand, the SDGs were a great breakthrough, a major development in really a sort of global human consciousness. We actually set of global goals around things that we all want for humanity and within a context of being sustainable. It's a great step forward. On the other hand, they failed to look at the actual overall system, that system I was talking about earlier, that system of extraction, exploitation, driven by corporations ultimately looking for profit and economic growth. It fails to look at that system. In fact, there's that one goal, number 8, which has been discussed in detail a lot, which actually talks about economic growth as part of what the goals are. Now, I think when we take a closer look at that, we realize that we have to make distinctions between, if we want to bring ideas of justice that Ricardo has talked about so eloquently already today, we have to look that growth means something very different for the global south or the global north. And we need to realize that actually continued growth in the global north, countries that are already far, far exceeding their carbon budgets and basically their ecological budget of any kind, is simply not feasible if we're looking at actually trying to share the wealth of the earth in a way that is fair for people everywhere, and that actually allows true sustainability, but going beyond sustainability, true regeneration of the earth. So I do feel that there is value. On the one hand, it's so wonderful that we're moving together as a human species with the intention to meet those goals. On the other hand, I think we need to do some hard discussions about the system itself, which allows a small elite of global North countries to continue to extract and exploit in a way that doesn't allow for those goals to be met. And that's why we're not meeting them. In fact, growth is not what is really required, even in the global South, but a reallocation of resources. It's not about getting things more efficient within the same system. It's about shifting the system so resources really get allocated according to justice and fairness.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ray, Jeremy. Wow. And putting all you've all said, I mean, it's like without the Earth Charter, just relying on the Sustainable Development Goals alone, we may not be going towards where we think we're going to. We will go to the wrong direction, not where we want to go, but where we are actually acting, to go. Just like Jeremy said, he said, we're moving away from the goals. But then, like Laura said, see, bring these two together. These two documents need to speak to each other, need to be connected, so that we can move towards an ecological civilization that will give us the global futures that we are dreaming about. And I think Jeremy, Ricardo was it that talked about the Sustainable Development Goals being mainly led by governments. And you'll see that the Earth Charter was produced mainly by the civil society, by the people, by the grassroots. And what they did, they spoke from the heart. So one was speaking from the head and the other from the heart. And these two needs to be brought together so that we can have a future that gives lives. Now, let's go on. Let's continue digging before we're going to open up this discussion to our participants. But let's look at one more question. And it's a long one, but it says, what are the necessary actions we need to take to significantly accelerate our response to addressing the pressing challenges and build ecological civilizations? How can the Earth Charter be used in the context of a possible planetary system collapse and the possibilities to a great transition towards an ecological civilization? Yeah, a mouthful. But then I know, Jeremy, you can break it down. Over to you, Jeremy.
Okay, sure. Yeah, well, in a way, this sort of follows on from what I was just talking about, because if we imagine if instead of the SDGs the way they are now, imagine if as a global community at the UN and all around the world, we got together to come up with a new set of goals and said, what if we actually tried to build our civilization around the principles of the Earth Charter, moving towards an ecological civilization? What would those goals look like? And imagine if maybe towards the end of this period, over the next few years, before we, as we head towards that expiration of the goals by 2030, if we start a global conversation to look at what the real big achievement should be if we actually build from those principles of what is life affirming. And I feel what we might come up with is a different set of emphases, like things like moving to initiatives that are not driven by these massive transnational for-profit corporations, but initiatives based on worker co-ops and initiatives based on the commons. We might find a bigger and bigger focus on agroecology, replacing industrial agriculture with permaculture design, and food sovereignty and seed sovereignty, just like these wonderful groups like the Via Campesina or other groups around the world are already focusing on goals that highlight what they're trying to do, goals that highlight deep democracy. I see somebody put in the chat, a question about, well, is democracy really the right way to go? Well, I think to me, the question is electoral democracy, the way we have it now, really true democracy? And I think with a true civilization arising from the Earth Charter, we'd see real grassroots government, things like citizens' assemblies, rather than this kind of faux democracy where, like, every few years, the elite oligarchs get to choose which two sort of oligarchs we can vote for to, like, lead our country in different ways. But a real democracy is one where people actually get together and talk together to find common solutions and find consensus. So these are some of the ideas. What about a rights of nature established at the United Nations, just like we have Universal Declaration of Human Rights, rights of nature, defining ecocide as a crime. So when these massive oil companies leave, like, polluted, poisonous rivers everywhere, people can actually be held accountable for things like that. Reparations for the global south, a universal basic income, caps on billionaires' wealth. These are the kinds of things where I feel a real set of goals moving towards the Earth Charter would be seen as standard, as what we have to base our future on. So those are some of my ideas.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Yeah, and there's this big question, that I have, from your submissions, that what will the goals, the sustainable development goals look like in the light of the Earth Charter and life-affirming and just principles? I mean, some students should do that. I think we need some of our research students to look at this issue and redefine the goals in the light of this life-sustaining and sustainable futures, ethical principles. Yes. So, Laura, what do you think on this subject?
Bueno, es una pregunta difícil, larga, pero creo que es una pregunta que, más allá de ser difícil y larga, puede transformarse en inspiración de muchas formas, así como la Carta de la Tierra es inspiración también de muchas formas. Y yo creo que para acelerar nuestra apuesta a los desafíos urgentes y construir civilizaciones ecológicas, realmente necesitamos tomar medidas hacia sociedades justas, también como lo mencionaban Ricardo y Jeremy. Creo que debemos transformar un poco nuestros sistemas económicos, porque sí es cierto que para el sur y para el norte global las definiciones de crecimiento pueden ser muy diferentes, las visiones de justicia incluso pueden ser muy diferentes, y es necesario tener una escucha activa, como un diálogo entre las dos regiones que tenemos en este momento, que son el sur y el norte global. Creo que se necesita hacer un camino dialógico y de nuevo de escucha activa muy poderosa, y también hablar sobre justicia social y ambiental, que deben ser pilares fundamentales en nuestra búsqueda de una civilización ecológica. Y cuando hablo de justicia, también hablo de justicia no solo de nuevo para los animales humanos, sino también para los animales no humanos. ¿Cuáles son los sistemas de justicia que estamos trayendo a la naturaleza? ¿Cuáles son los sistemas de justicia que estamos teniendo en los sistemas de producción actuales? ¿Cuáles son los sistemas de justicia que estamos ejecutando, asesinando un montón de animales no humanos en el día a día? Y no solo en los sistemas de producción, sino también en el tráfico de especies, en cómo igual día a día crecemos las ciudades sin pensar en estas ciudades, en estos ecosistemas estratégicos en donde estamos captando y capturando territorios que proveen vida. Creo también que debe ser fundamental la protección y restauración de ecosistemas hacia una transición, hacia una civilización ecológica justa, pero aquí creo que no debe ir de arriba hacia abajo, sino que a mí me gusta mucho la postura que tienen los pensadores de la investigación, acción participativa, en donde en colectivo se llega a transformaciones más impactantes, creo yo, porque es el poder de lo colectivo lo que realmente nos va a llevar hacia una transición, hacia civilizaciones globales justas. Y creo que aquí la Carta de la Tierra pues es un faro de inspiración y acción, integrando todos estos principios en nuestras vidas diarias, pero no solo como individuos, sino como políticas e instituciones. Es decir, creo que sería fundamental integrar la visión de Carta de la Tierra en el sector político, que si bien la Carta de la Tierra no tiene que politizarse, sí es necesario que se tenga en cuenta en el sector político, porque pues además es uno de los sectores que más vemos que sufre con corrupción, con desigualdad, con injusticia, y se permean estos sistemas que han venido ejecutándose desde la política, y creo que la Carta de la Tierra tiene un poder transformador allí. Y para terminar con la segunda parte de la pregunta, creo que en el contexto de un posible colapso del sistema planetario y las posibilidades de una gran transición hacia una civilización ecológica, la Carta de la Tierra juega un papel fundamental, por lo que ya hemos hablado, que nos brinda un marco ético que nos guía hacia un desarrollo equitativo, no solo sostenible, sino equitativo y justo. Nos inspira a movilizar personas, gobiernos, organizaciones. Y para lograr esta transición significativa es crucial para mí difundir, promover y ampliar los principios de Carta de la Tierra, y establecer alianzas, que creo que desde la Secretaría hacen un trabajo maravilloso creando estas alianzas para que efectivamente la Carta de la Tierra sea un instrumento mucho más poderoso. Y solo terminaría con que hay algo muy importante que menciona Carta de la Tierra desde hace 23 años, y es que el tiempo es ahora y la acción es clave para el futuro que queremos. Y creo que ese ahora lo hemos dejado posponer en muchas de nuestras acciones, y creo que ese ahora sí se tiene que convertir como en una premisa diaria al levantarnos de la cama y decir, este ahora es el futuro que estoy construyendo para entender los sistemas de justicia, no solo en las personas, sino también en los animales y en la naturaleza. El momento es ahora para transformar mi realidad, y el momento es ahora para inspirar a otras personas a sumarse a esto que puede construir un mundo real de civilizaciones ecológicas.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, we hear you. The time is now, like you said, to build fair societies. We don't just want green societies. We want green societies that are fair. The time is now. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh,
go ahead.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. The time is now to listen to each other, to bring in all the communities. You know, no one size fits all. The time is now to, in the words of Laura, I think she talked about the power of the collective. The time is now to stop destroying the production systems of nature. And the time is now to integrate the Earth Charter into our decision-making, our lifestyle. We want to, this note, before we bring in the participant, I want to say a big thank you to our panelists, but just be thinking of one word that you're going to conclude with. I'd like to hand over to Miriam at this point so that you can take a question time with our participants, before we come back to the panelists and close. Thank you.
Yeah, we have about 15 more minutes, so we need to make use 15 to 20 minutes max. So we need to make good use of that time and be very brief in our answers. So the floor is open. So if you have a specific question to our panelists, of course, we are more than welcome to write in the chat box, or maybe even to raise your hand so that we can see it better. But I want to bring to the floor one thing that has been said several times here in the chat box. It seems that there are several people I see here making comments about the issue of exploitation of animals in the industrial farms. That's of course related to billions of animals being slaughtered for meat. I suppose that, of course, this question is if we envision an ecological civilization, we would envision a civilization that has changed our patterns or behaviors, consumers of what we eat or what we don't eat, what we generate as waste or not, and how we impact. So anyway, I'm bringing this to any of our panelists as an issue that has been said not only by one person, but several in the chat box. Basically, the question is, meat is a big problem. animal slaughter is a big problem. How do we address that? The SDGs have addressed that explicitly. I can add here just one thing for the concerns. Certainly, this was largely talked about during the decade of the 90s when the Earth Charter was being drafted. Actually, one of the institutions that were very much part of the drafting and consultation process of the Earth Charter was the Humane Society of the United States, which is an institution that is very much working around this. So they have been taking part in the consultation and drafting process of the Earth Charter, including Rick Cluxton, who has been very vocal about precisely these issues about the consumption of meat being a big problem. So it's embedded, that conversation around not harming animals, it's there in their charter. But anyway, so I just want to bring to the speakers here, to the panelists, if anyone would like, just maybe one of you would like to respond to this concern that we see here in the chat box on, which indeed is a problem. So meat is a big problem, and the animal industrial farms. Because this is a different issue depending on where we are in the world. I think it's a cultural thing, but it's also there are countries that have more impact than others in industrial farming. We cannot talk about that with the same lens because there are different contexts, different not only cultural contexts, but also different impact in industrial farming, depending on where we are in the world. And I certainly, because of the impact in the US, I would like to bring in Germany here because, and again, I want to emphasize here that this problem has a different impact depending on where we are in the world. But Jeremy, just because you are in the US, do you have anything to say on this?
Yeah, sure. I just so strongly agree with this whole thread of ideas. I mean, on a moral basis, it's really potentially over all the history of the earth, it's maybe the greatest crime that has ever been committed against sentient beings is what our civilization does every day, in the torture and destruction of animals to the massive extent that it's done. It has to be stopped as any kind of basis for an ethical framework going forward. And at the same time, of course, as we know, billions of people love their meat. Here in the United States, of course, it's a massive meat-eating country. And so we have to look at some of these systemic issues around that and recognize that the impacts of that meat eating is not just the ethical question, but is the destruction of the forests in Brazil to grow the soy, which then gets shipped to countries like, say, China or whatever, to then feed pigs or cows, which then get eaten. So the whole system is a destructive system. So how do we get out of that? Well, one way, obviously, is for governments to shift their policies to stop subsidizing those kind of destructive activities and actually subsidize investments in other ways of being. Obviously, individually moving towards vegetarian, non-meat eating practices. Vegan, obviously, is the ultimate best way to go. And then it raises interesting possibilities about the intersection of technology and agriculture. The English journalist George Monbiot, this very strong environmental advocate, has written about the possibilities of what's called precision fermentation, to actually use technology to create tasty, actually wonderful protein that could, with the right kind of investment, the right kind of subsidies, actually begin to allow people to enjoy whatever pleasure people get from meat, but without actually having to go through this destructive process right now. So very important. There are solutions, but we need to be talking about those.
Thank you, Jeremy. I see Ricardo, if you have a very specific point on this, otherwise I think we should move on. Ricardo.
Laura raised her hand before me. Then
okay,
please, Laura,
Laura.
go ahead.
Gracias, Ricardo. Sí, yo solo quería mencionar que si bien estoy muy de acuerdo con lo que está mencionando Jeremy, que durante siglos hemos promocionado pues el eliminar vidas sintientes del planeta, también creo que en la actualidad sería muy difícil generalizar que todos y todas tengamos alimentaciones basadas en plantas, porque por un tema de justicia social, por temas de infraestructura, porque no a todos los lugares, y pongo el ejemplo de Colombia, no a todos los lugares podría llegar alimentación bien estructurada basada en plantas. Y también es un sistema que viene desde la concepción de nuestra alimentación. Para muchas personas, por ejemplo, no consumir alimentos animales hoy en día pues implica no tener una buena alimentación. Entonces, más que abolir los sistemas de producción animal en este momento, creo yo que tiene que ser una transición de varias décadas, desde la estructura de la educación en la niñez y en la adolescencia, el entender que la alimentación puede ser de diferentes maneras y que tomar decisiones conscientes a través de la alimentación es una apuesta ética, es una apuesta por la vida, pero no creo que la respuesta correcta sea hoy abolir los sistemas de producción de animales, aunque no estoy de acuerdo, yo tampoco consumo animales, pero sí creo que toca pensarse esta respuesta desde la parte de justicia social y porque desde el norte global es mucho más fácil, por ejemplo, ser vegetariano o vegano, porque existen los medios económicos, porque actualmente el ser vegano o vegetariano no implica los mismos costos económicos para el sur global. Y aquí volvemos a poner sobre la mesa la pregunta de cuál es el desarrollo económico que tiene el sur y el norte global para poder enfrentar estos desafíos hacia civilizaciones ecológicas. Entonces, para mí la respuesta sí tiene que verse desde la economía, desde la justicia y no solo desde la abolición, porque si bien la abolición puede ser realidad en unas décadas, no creo que sea la respuesta en la actualidad. Sí creo que tiene que ser una decisión consciente y de educación interna en nuestras familias, pero también una apuesta en la educación desde la primera infancia. Aquí en Bogotá, desde la declaración de la emergencia climática, por ejemplo, tenemos un día sin carne, que es una apuesta política muy interesante, pero creo que solo tener un día sin carne no visualiza toda la complejidad del problema que es la producción animal y también pues, los impactos que esto tiene en la ecología. Entonces sí creo que necesita una respuesta no inmediata, sino una respuesta compleja, interconectada, pero sí para un par de décadas y para mí la respuesta no es la abolición en la actualidad.
Ricardo, you had your hand up.
No, I think that Laura summarized a lot of what I would say about the meat issue. But still, before the end, I would like to make a comment in what Expesi bring to us about the relationship of Earth Charter and SDGs. I would like to make a comment about this at the end.
Okay, so any of the panelists or our participants here would like to pick up on any of the comments of questions? We have many comments and questions in the chat box. Just the latest one here I can read is, what if we each looked at the Earth Charter and the SDGs through the lenses of our local communities? Maybe we can comment on this, any one of you.
The comment I would like to do it now then, is that regarding to meat, regarding to consumption, regarding to several issues we have in our society, we have at the roots of all of this an ethical issue. What values we think we have to have in our lives in order to live in this world community that's facing all these social and climate problems. And I think that the Earth Charter brings this. The Earth Charter should be on the table of politicians, of business leaders, of leaders in general, at the universities. Everyone should have at their table a copy of the Earth Charter, because if we look to look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was approved in 48 on United Nations, and we look 23 years after the Declaration of the Human Rights, we will see that we were under the worst dictatorships in the world. That was the beginning of the 70s, the end of the 60s and beginning of the 70s. We were acting as a human being completely against what the declaration brought as the new ethics of the post-war. We were still in the Cold War. We still had the world division. We had all South America under dictatorship and other countries in the world and so on. Today, we can say that we are much better in those issues, human rights and other issues, democracy, than we were in the beginning of the 70s. What I want to say about this? I want to say that we are still in the beginning of the story of the Earth Charter. I think that we should spread the Earth Charter as a gospel around the world, insist in it as the Human Declaration of Human Rights was. The Human Declaration of Human Rights were in the schools, were in the university, were in the schools of philosophy and the curriculum of university and curriculum of business leaders and so on. And we have to work in the superstructure of society, bringing this new ethic reference to answer these questions. What's the harm of the meat? What's the harm of consumption? What's the harm of plundering the nature? What's the harm of looking at industry only as a way of producing goods without consequences and so on? Bring the systemic view to the human activity in general. Now, I think that the most important task we have to the next 2 decades is spread out the Earth Charter as, you know, the main and strong and deep reference to the new ethic of the world needs to a sustainable destination.
Thank you. So we have a couple of questions here in the Q&A specific side of our, I just want to bring this to your attention. One of, what are some of the good practices in the effort of implementing the SDGs? What are the person, I think, got also what we were asking, and some of you have answered here. There's a question about what do you think about the universal basic income in the promotion of social justice? If anyone would like to take this one. And so, Jeremy, is there a framework in place for privileged individuals to relocate the resources they have accumulated to invest towards habitat restoration of social equity, something more robust than just donating to organizations? Mm-hmm. So maybe given the time limit we have, just give this to the first one, maybe to Jeremy, and if Ricardo, Akpezi, or Laura wants to take the other one. So Jeremy.
Yeah, sure. Well, so I'll just take 1 minute to talk about that. I'm really glad that Jonathan Ribeiro raised this question about universal basic income. To my mind, I see it as one of the fundamental foundations of what an ecological civilization would be. Because when we look at the amount of wealth that has been created all around the world, and so much of it is siphoned off to these like mega billionaires or the very, very small elite. And we recognize that the injustice about that is massive. In fact, the vast, vast majority of this wealth is not because some entrepreneur created the wealth. It's the general heritage of all humankind going back over generations and thousands of years. Basically, it's a true commonwealth. if we take the real meaning of that word. And the way that that can be fairly distributed would be through a universal basic income, basically a standard amount of money that every citizen of every part of the world, every human being gets simply by being alive, because that is their right as human beings to be able to live a life of dignity. And contrary to what people think, there's this idea that, oh, if you just give money to people without them earning it, they'll waste it. The opposite is true. Every single trial of universal basic income has shown that when people get their basic needs met financially, they put their time into working for others, working for their community, and doing the things that they really care about in the world. So I think it's just fundamental, and I'm really glad that question got raised today.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Laura, you want to jump in on here? Very quick and specific.
Sí, muchas gracias. Quisiera hacer un comentario justo que complementa la pregunta que acaban de hacer, con la que también respondió Ricardo, y es que yo creo que los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible y la Carta de la Tierra quedan como encerrados en un grupo de personas que estamos muy interesadas en términos de sostenibilidad, pero que muy rara vez se aterrizan a lo local y a lo comunitario. Y para mí las respuestas a muchos problemas sistémicos sí son comunitarios. Entonces creo que sí debe haber un esfuerzo muy grande en aterrizar a lo local, a lo comunitario, que está muy relacionado con la pregunta que le hacían a Ricardo. Y cuando entendemos la justicia desde lo comunitario, desde el bienestar colectivo, creo que podemos entender por qué también estas, por ejemplo, se me olvidó la palabra en español, pero esto como del ingreso solidario base para las personas que tienen pocos recursos, creo que desde lo colectivo podemos entender por qué soluciones como estas son necesarias en un mundo que no provee los servicios en la actualidad para sobrevivir, para vivir en la tierra, porque es que no estamos hablando de que vamos a dar como un salario base universal a personas que tienen lujo, sino personas que en su día a día tienen limitaciones para vivir, para habitar la tierra. Entonces no es una cuestión de economía, es una cuestión para mí de justicia, que se soluciona de nuevo desde entender por qué estas soluciones son necesarias desde lo colectivo, desde el corazón colectivo, más que desde el pensamiento y el raciocinio colectivo. Para mí se tienen que entender desde el corazón colectivo, desde la empatía, que creo que también nos ofrece mucho Carta de la Tierra, porque entender en aterrizar estos lenguajes, y cuando hablamos de aterrizar los lenguajes a veces siento que viene desde una perspectiva muy vertical, pero son las palabras que existen hoy en día para hablar sobre cómo aterrizar los lenguajes de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible y Carta de la Tierra a las comunidades que son las que realmente están ejecutando acciones hacia civilizaciones sostenibles. Para mí es importante tener diálogos directos, diálogos de escucha activa entre las instituciones de educación superior, por ejemplo, con las colectividades en territorio, más allá de traer soluciones muy técnicas. Creo que sí es necesario retornar a muchos principios que nos propone la investigación acción participativa, como la autodeterminación, la empatía y otros principios que nos permiten entender por qué igual es necesario tener estos diálogos horizontales, no diálogos verticales, no soluciones verticales, no de arriba hacia abajo, sino como un acuerdo colectivo hacia preservar la vida.
Gracias, Laura. Muchas gracias. We are about to close, but I still want to give the floor to give each of the speakers, including Akpezi, 1 minute to offer your concluding remarks, given this question that is in our mind here. And I'll actually bring to the floor Michael Bracken before we give you the floor. This question is around building ecological civilizations. How can we press the acceleration or our accelerator towards that, because we do not have time? What comes to my mind with this last bit of conversation here is that we went through a similar conversation about all these issues about shared distribution of resources, how we deal with this issue of relating with the animals and consumption of how to treat living beings. We went through a deep conversation on this, not just in a webinar, but through a decade, and how to craft the language around that into the Earth Charter. So it comes to my mind, again, this need of an ongoing dialogue of how do we understand all these issues. It's of course very important. So anyway, we'll give the floor to each one of you, of our panelists, including Akpezi, for you to just share with us your last thoughts on moving towards building an ecological civilization. And before that, let me give the floor to Michael Bracken, who is the chair of our board. Michael.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you everybody for joining us on the 23rd anniversary of the birth of the Earth Charter. I just want to mention a couple of things before I recognize everybody who has contributed to this discussion today. I read an interesting article several weeks ago that ties in so well with a lot of the parts of our discussion. And it's kind of interesting. I live in the United States, and the United States and Europe have both experienced a change in inequality in that fewer people have more of the wealth. And there are a lot of articles about it. But this article I read last week was from a different perspective, a more macro perspective. And their point of view was when you factor in the 800 million people that have gone from poverty to middle class in China over the last 40 years, and you look at the planet on a net basis, the middle class is actually ahead. So on a global basis, the middle class is ahead, even though it's down in the global north in both North America and Europe. I just want to plant that because it was a really interesting perspective, and it ties in exactly with a lot of things we discussed today. Next, I want to recognize Akpezi for doing a fabulous job as the facilitator, and the great feedback we had from each of our speakers, Laura, Jeremy, Ricardo, and Marianne. And this is just wonderful. I have never been to a better birthday party than today in terms of really being engaged for the whole time. So thank you, as well as each of you who attended. I happen to notice that our attendance has been very high throughout the discussion, and I salute all of our participants. We also want to welcome Sam Crowell from our council, who's serving on our panel as well. And before I turn over to Akpezi, I just want to share a brief birthday commentary about the Earth Charter. Today marks a significant milestone as we celebrate the 23rd anniversary of the Earth Charter. For over 2 decades, this visionary declaration has served as a guiding light, similar to Laura said, a lighthouse, inspiring individuals, communities, and nations to embrace sustainable development and promote a harmonious relationship between humanity and the natural world, which ties in with many things we discussed today. The Earth Charter has propelled us towards a collective consciousness, hopefully a higher consciousness, urging us to recognize our interconnectedness and shared responsibility for the well-being of our planet. As we reflect on its impact, let us recommit ourselves to the principles that it upholds, fostering a global movement of environmental stewardship, social justice, and peace. Together, we can all build a brighter future for generations to come, guided by the profound wisdom and ethical framework of the Earth Charter. Happy 23rd anniversary for the Earth Charter. Happy 23rd anniversary for each of you. And it's now my pleasure to turn the podium back over to Miriam.
Thank you, Michael. Good to hear you. So let's start with Ricardo. Last final remarks.
First of all, thank you very much for this great session. And I would like to say that we should not give up. We are still in the beginning. And all the Charter community around the world have to continue its work to spread out this incredible source of inspiration, values, and ethical reference, because the Charter is in the core, in the center of all of the change we want to see in the world. Then let's not give up. Let's put our energy, and 2 decades from now, we will see amazing things happening, and we will see the Earth Charter as a strong reference of the new things that will emerge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ricardo. Laura?
Gracias, Miriam. Creo que yo diría que Carta de la Tierra es una visión inspiradora que nos invita a construir lo que hemos hablado hoy, civilizaciones ecológicas basadas en la justicia social y en la justicia natural, y nos llama a reconocer esta interconexión profunda entre todos los seres vivos y a honrar los derechos y la dignidad de cada uno de ellos, ya sean humanos o no humanos, porque como lo mencioné, la dignidad no solo le pertenece al ser humano. Y en nuestro camino hacia la construcción de civilizaciones ecológicas, creo que es fundamental abordar la justicia social como un pilar y una apuesta colectiva. Debemos trabajar incansablemente para eliminar la pobreza, la desigualdad y la discriminación en todas sus formas. A propósito del mes del orgullo, que es junio, también creo que hace falta mencionar que Carta de la Tierra también debe tener una apuesta no discriminatoria, y la justicia no solo se limita a los seres humanos, sino que abarca la naturaleza y a los animales no humanos. La justicia natural nos insta a respetar y proteger la diversidad y la belleza de la tierra, no por el hecho de ser bella, sino porque tiene derecho a existir y coexistir con nosotros y nosotras. También la Carta de la Tierra nos recuerda que es nuestra responsabilidad y que esa responsabilidad se extiende más allá de nuestras fronteras humanas, que debemos extender la compasión y la empatía, tratándonos con dignidad y respeto. La relación con los animales sí debe basarse en la comprensión de su importancia en los ecosistemas, pero también en el reconocimiento de su valor inherente, considero yo. Y pues en este viaje hacia la justicia y la sostenibilidad, creo que la Carta de la Tierra nos guía como una brújula moral, nos inspira a dar lo mejor de nosotros y nosotras, a abrir nuestros corazones y mentes y a tomar decisiones que creo que en medio de todo nosotras somos personas que ha tomado la decisión valiente de apostarle a un marco ético como Carta de la Tierra. Hemos sido valientes en construir y en tener esta apuesta para construir de manera colectiva civilizaciones ecológicas, en donde la justicia social y la natural son los cimientos de un mundo más equitativo, próspero y en armonía. Y me alegra mucho el corazón, más que alegrarme de compartir aquí con personas tan maravillosas, me alegra mucho el corazón poder escucharles, poder entender otras prácticas y poder ver el calor de sus corazones en pro de la justicia y en pro del amor por la tierra y para reverenciar la vida.
Super. Gracias, Laura. Jeremy?
Wow, so beautiful. Thanks. And yeah, so really, I would like to also just amplify what I saw Ricardo saying earlier about this amazing idea of the Earth Charter being there, like disseminated around the world, so everyone gets to understand this is a foundation. This is what we can actually build our civilization on. And I saw Diana say in the chat about the idea, if you go into a hotel along with the Bible, there's the Earth Charter in every drawer of in every school child to actually come across the Earth Charter early in their education and realize there is a different foundation for building life. And so until we get to that wonderful place, I feel like each of us has the potential to be one of those people who does disseminate, like Ricardo called it, the gospel. It's a different kind of gospel. It is a foundational set of ethical truths that together could actually be the foundation for a really wonderful, flourishing future for all humanity on a regenerated earth. What a wonderful place to begin. And I personally am so grateful to all those who spent those years and years putting that together, creating a global document for all humanity and for all of life to look forward to. So, and it's a special day today to be able to celebrate the birthday of this charter. And I do feel each of us has that responsibility, as well as the opportunity to really share that in our own individual conversations with people, make sure it becomes part of people's shared consciousness.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Akpezi.
No, first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who has connected, everyone who is part of this, program. And I want to say that we have a conference coming up in April in Florida. So I see that there's a lot of questions and, activities. if we can take these further, we could have, sessions where we can come back to these questions and issues so that we can really talk about them and set out, the, actions, to take regarding the questions you're asking. And I'm going to also, I want to appreciate our brilliant and passionate panelists, Jeremy, Ricardo, Laura, and of course, our host, Miriam, and our chair, Michael. Yeah, thank you so much. And as we close, I would like us to think of this word. It says planetary well-being and ecological civilizations. So just take a minute to reflect. We've been talking, we've been listening. What do you see? What do you see in the future? What do you see? Write it down. But I will share with you what I see as I reflect. What I see in 2030. I still see a dark night. But then it's filled with stars. Our Earth, beautiful still, in spite of the challenges. As each of us, you and I, in our homes, communities, businesses, institutions, governments, shining with acts of kindness, respect, justice, and innovation. As we keep breathing multiple stars to neutralize the dark night. Please keep the fire burning by keeping up with the Earth Charter, masterclasses, courses, webinars, and for more information, click on the website, Earth Charter website. I want to thank every one of you stars. You are all stars. Never stop shining and breathing stars. And for one last exercise, please, just close your eyes. What is the biggest fear you have about the planet, about the future? Open your eyes a bit for a second and just hold your hands like this, into your face. So put that fear there, just close it. What is it? Think about it. What is the biggest fear? Now open your hands and visualize letting it go. There, it's gone. Now focus on just one intervention, one thing you can do. Let's get up and go do it. Thank you. Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much, Akpezi, for your wonderful words. And let's think of acts of kindness by 2030 and beyond. And join our efforts to build this new transition towards an ecological civilization. Thank you so much. All the best.